All right, guys. Well, welcome to another Fireside Chat. Today we're going to be talking about the future of online learning for musicians. And with us today, we have a really cool team that created the product Forte, which is a new product. It's the first video conferencing platform designed specifically for musicians. So they're solving a lot of the problems that the existing video platforms have not done a good job of with helping from music lessons. So very excited to talk with them. I guess the first, let's just if you guys could just introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, and I guess talk a little bit about your role at Forte. That would be great. So Mark, if you could kick it off.
Sure. So thanks everyone for joining today. My name's Mark. I am the co-founder and CEO of Forte. I'm from New York City. That's where I am right now. And my background prior to founding Forte was I was working as a consultant for some of the world's top conservatories, helping them develop strategies for extending their educational mission so that they could reach audiences they hadn't been reaching previously, particularly internationally.
Cool. I'm Hunter. Thanks for joining, everyone. I'm the other co-founder and the chief product officer at Forte. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I live in Austin, Texas now, and I know Mark through my job before we founded Forte. I worked at Magic Leap, which is an augmented reality company building head-mounted displays, and I headed up their music education platform. So think putting on regular glasses just with really intense sensors on the outside that can digitally overlay the world around you. And if you look at any instrument, it would digitally overlay the instruments, and any key you press on the instrument, it would tell you what note you're playing, or you could put your hands inside of digitally overlaid teacher hands and follow along and learn the basic core fundamentals of these instruments in a fun, fast way, faster than looking up and down at a YouTube screen. Last year, when everyone was forced online, I've been working with Mark, who was at Juilliard, on the lesson plan side of those applications, and we were talking, and there was just a pretty obvious need for a purpose-built platform for online music lessons, because the platforms available to the masses like Zoom or FaceTime or Google Meets or Skype or Microsoft Teams are all built for business meetings, and hearing instruments was difficult. So the conservatories Mark had been working with that he mentioned were telling him that there was a problem, and we got together to fix it.
Yeah, and I'm Liam. Hello, everyone. I'm a professional performer, trumpet player. I am a Juilliard graduate, but also I was a member of the Malaysian Philharmonic Orchestra for 7 seasons. So I'm very familiar with Southeast Asia, and I've been to Singapore a bunch of times, love the food, and I miss Southeast Asia and my life out there a lot. And it's been a great part of this project has been reconnecting with my networks, and still enjoying my connections and remembering the music I made when I was in Asia, and finding a way to keep those networks strong. And Forte has been a big help with that. So yeah, I play a lot in orchestras, mainly the New York Philharmonic and the Metropolitan Opera, among others. But yeah, Mark and Hunter approached me really in probably the deepest part of COVID in New York City. And I was doing like what most of my friends were doing, which was, not performing, and all of my teaching went online. So it was a really breath of fresh air to meet 2 people that were literally trying to tackle all the frustrations that I was having with my lessons online. So when they asked me to help them run the first pilot program, which we did, which was with Curtis, the Curtis Institute, and and an online school based in California, I was excited to jump on board and kind of be the ears and educational planning behind what we're doing at Forte, and kind of help the musicians concept and ideas really come through with all the work that we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are a power team. It's a tight trio. Could we get a little bit of the background story of how you guys started? Hunter, you kind of hinted at it earlier.
Yeah, Mark did all this work with the World Stock Conservatories, which to me, which is not my world at the time. I was more in the tech world, but those are the highest class music teachers in my mind. And he was hearing that that they were having a really difficult time transitioning to online music lessons. And I have this tech background where I connected to a lot of really great engineers. And once I understood the problem Mark was describing, I knew it was a problem we could solve. And it focused a lot on the audio, not so much the video. Mark, I'll let you kind of talk about the hacks that the Institute was using at the time, different tools they were using combined to try to make it work. And that was kind of what we used as our calling card to go build Forte.
Yeah. I mean, taking a step back, I had been working with, both mentioned, the Juilliard School, Royal College of Music in London, Berkeley in Boston, Curtis, and it, you do a lot of work with those really terrific places, and they're all terrific places. But you particularly as, I'm not a performer. I'm not a musician. I always say I wasn't born with the performer's gene. I was born with the applause gene. And, to just be in awe of all of the creativity and the skill and the talent and the knowledge that is embodied in those institutions. But they, it was really kind of trapped within the four walls of their buildings. Like when I first started working at Juilliard, really all of that energy and all of that intellectual property and all of that skill and knowledge and creativity was really only being deployed for the benefit of 850 students inside the four walls of the building here in New York. And just as an institution, it had so much to offer to so many more people around the world, which is why we started to think about things like developing a branch campus in China for families in China who have, who can't afford to send their kid to go live in New York for 4 years, or developing online courses, things like that. And so it's that access question that was kind of a prime motivator behind the early days of Forte, that, we could make it easier for someone who doesn't live in a cultural capital, doesn't have access next door down the street to really high quality music instruction to get that. And all of that was pre-COVID. When COVID struck here in the US, I was speaking to the folks with whom I'd been working at some of these conservatories and asking them, well, what are you doing? Now that you can't teach online, how is that working? And there was a ton of frustration because of some of the things that Hunter mentioned with the limitations of these business tools when they're applied toward music education. And in particular, we were talking to the folks at Curtis, and they said, well, what we're doing for our instrument instruction that's been pushed online is the teacher and the student both get on Zoom, mute the camera and mute the speaker, and then they launch a product called Clean Feed, which has the ability to deliver very high quality audio over the internet. And so they're getting the video from Zoom and the audio from Clean Feed. Sometimes they get out of sync. You can't record it because the video is here and the audio is there. And it's just very cumbersome for both the teacher and the student, and the technology is just getting in the way. And so they said, look, if you can create a tool that is easy to use, everything runs in a browser, and can provide audio that's as good or better than clean feed, then we're all in, because that's what we need. And so Hunter and I had been working together for a little while at that point. We took that as our marching orders. We've got to go create something like that, because this is an urgent problem that needs to be solved. And if we could solve it during the darkest days of COVID, we know we could also, we would create a tool that would survive after COVID and would be useful in solving those access problems I mentioned earlier.
Okay, so it sounds like audio was like the big problem that Forte addressed, at least separate from the cultural and the pedagogical stuff. Audio, the clean feed was apparently doing well, made the big difference.
Yeah, I was pairing the audio with the video tool. Clean feed was strictly, there's no video with clean feed. And yeah, there's
go ahead.
The audio codecs for Zoom and FaceTime and all the other tools everyone's familiar with are optimized for what we're doing right now, the spoken human voice. And anything that those audio codecs hear that are not the spoken human voice, even if it's a human singing, they're trained to compress that audio. So if someone's air conditioning is running in the background, the Zoom is trained to shut that noise out. If someone were to start jamming on a guitar, you wouldn't hear the first few notes. Or if Liam were to start playing a trumpet there's like a finite amount of seconds, you'll notice it's here, and then the tool notices that it's not the spoken human voice, and it drops, and you can barely hear it anymore. And it wasn't easy. We've, spent a lot of time kind of tweaking under the hood, trying to get it right with how much we suppress the noise, how much we don't, how much we want to cancel the echo, how much we don't, how much we want the auto gain up or down. Liam's the only one who can really hear it out of this team. Mark and I are not musicians, as we said. And then the teachers from the schools that Mark was working with, we ran it through them for a while too. But yeah, you're right. It's more important than video for instrument instruction. Whereas in business meetings, the video is probably more important because you're, looking at people's faces and stuff. If there's a not perfect connection for an online music lesson, we optimize the audio we prioritize the audio over the video. So if, say, the student has really bad connection, you will start to see a degraded video quality before you start to hear a degraded audio quality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's the, business meetings are easy. Teaching someone to play an instrument's really hard. And it felt like these business tools were just not up to the task. That the work of music teachers is important enough and difficult enough that it deserves a purpose-built platform. And audio was the first step with that, as Hunter described. But there are a lot of other things that the generalized tools like Zoom don't get right for music lessons. Another example is if I were to share my screen right now, it assumes I'm sharing a PowerPoint, and now we're all not looking at each other, we're looking at the PowerPoint, and our video tiles would be relegated to just a little corner of the screen. For a music lesson, if you want to share sheet music, that's a bad idea because you still want to be able to see your student, and you want students to still be able to see you. So we also spent a lot of time thinking about how to allocate screen real estate. So if you share a piece of sheet music on Forte, you can see all of it, but you can also still see your student very clearly. Lots of little things like that are super helpful to a music lesson that don't necessarily come across on these generalized platforms.
Gotcha. Can you guys expand on that? Like, I would love if you guys could paint a picture of some of the ways the experience of Forte is different. I remember, so the video thing is one, but also I remember you guys were mentioning earlier when we were speaking about about the ability to talk at the same time. Like that's something that I wouldn't have thought of, but I can see that would make a huge difference. Like, what are the other experience stuff?
Yeah, when you're teaching a lesson on most online platforms, the biggest frustration is the fact that when I try and speak to my student while they're playing, most of the time they can't hear me at all. So I don't speak to them. I have to like wave my hands to get them to get out of, they're in the zone trying to play, and I just want to give them one audio cue or one little note, like tempo, or crescendo through here, and that's often lost to the point where I completely changed my style of teaching for a while there, because I couldn't have these nuanced moments with my students when we're really getting into the music at the right time, right? Like when they're just about to feel that octave jump, I want to be able to tell them support through the octave jump. I don't want to have to wait until he's done playing his whole excerpt and then go back and try and have him or her remember that feeling. So in Forte, we call it full duplex audio, and that's when we're having all the sound going both ways the entire time at a bit rate that is over 3 times what Zoom can offer. And we want to hear everything in the room. If there's a fan on, we want to hear it. I think in the case of a business meeting, you want to get all of that out of there. I want to talk about how I'm interacting with the room, with my students. Another thing is I want to be able to remember all of the things that we talked about in the lesson. On Zoom, you're using the chat, you're using the screen sharing, you're sharing files, and all of that disappears as soon as you click hang up on the meeting. And that was ultimately frustrating for me because my entire system was based on a notebook. I had a student notebook that they would bring to every lesson. If they didn't bring the lesson, I wouldn't let them in the door. No joke. I usually let them get by with one forget every now and again, but the notebook was essential to my practice and my education as a young player. Everything that my teacher wrote in that notebook, I was looking at every single day when I was practicing. I picked up my case to practice. What am I supposed to practice? I don't know. I look at the notebook. My teacher reminded me with his handwriting, all there. And we looked at that notebook together and we talked about how my practice was going to be informed on those notes. And then when lessons moved online, I could not get all of that information in the same place where it was clear enough for both me to remember what my student was working on when they come into the lesson each week, but also, and more importantly, for my student to have a record of what we talked about in the lesson, the assignments that I want them to have, and the ideas and concepts that we talked about when we were going through these different exercises and repertoire. And it seems like such a simple concept, but I was like taking my notes and having my student take their notes, and then I would like snap a picture on my phone and email it to their parent, and their parent would then like text message to the kid, and by that time the next lesson had already surpassed, we passed the next lesson. It was not at all productive. It was only getting in the way. So I stopped that too. Then I was really just trying to connect with my students, in the time that we had, because, that in-person live time became so precious when we all moved to COVID. Like we were like a Zoom with a friend was actually like, it's a really amazing moment in our lives. So I got rid of all of these features and tools that I was trying to use from my old life. And I was trying to fit them into Zoom, and then Forte comes along, and we added an integrated Google Doc, which seems like kind of a simple but so essential thing. We just have a nice little pencil icon at the bottom of the screen. You barely notice it, but when you click in it, you have a Google Doc. It automatically connects you and your student. You can write anything you want in there during the lesson. You can write in things between the lesson. I often check my Google Doc like in between lessons, especially when I really want to make sure that they're practicing something. I'll make sure that they note down all they're practicing, and I can monitor and help them by using this Google Doc. So finally, I have something that acts as that notebook that I was used to, but it kind of made me feel like dating myself a little bit. Like I remember my notebook, I remember back in the day, and like for sure, like this is like the future of music lessons everything's moving on to the internet, and here we are, like what seemed like just like oh, that's easy to do. Let's just add this like Google Doc, they integrate it. But like no one was thinking for music teachers until we started this. No one was saying like, okay, yeah, it's just a simple thing. Let's add this because it's good for music teachers. You know, Forte or Zoom doesn't have that focus, right? They're not gonna be as passionate about what music teachers need as we are. And clearly, I get going on this, and I get all passionate myself. So that's what we're trying to get at, is like what little things can we start, chiseling it away to make the sculpture of Forte like something that people really can relate to in an artistic and human level.
Another thing that Liam touched on there is when you're giving music lessons on Zoom, or when you're just having a business meeting on Zoom and you're sharing notes or a link or login credentials or whatever in the chat, as soon as you end the Zoom, it's gone. One really seems really simple, but we added a feature where in the live chat, not the shared notebook Liam was talking about in the Google Doc, but the actual live chat in the session, after the session ends, the chat is automatically downloaded into a PDF on each of the users' computers. So you have all the notes that were taken without having to think of anything. And all the stuff we're talking about now is the obvious low-hanging fruit that was there for us to change about the existing platforms and make it specific music lessons. And after we got those out there and people started using Forte, Mark and I are not music teachers. We survey our users. We ask them, what features do you guys want next? And that's how we kind of base our immediate product roadmap on what we release next. So piano teachers, we're saying, it's different for each instrument, right? You can play a trumpet, see the whole instrument. You can look at the guitar, but with piano, like where do you place your laptop? You want to be able to see your teacher's face, your student's face. So you place it on the other side of the piano, but then you can't see the hands. And some piano teachers like to be able to have their desktop or their primary camera laptop placed on the piano, but they also want to be able to log in from their phones at the same time and put it either on their boom mic or just place it on the side of the piano so the student can see their hand placement, or are they on the fingers. So we're about to release a feature where you can click the settings gear, click add second camera, you point your phone at a QR code, it launches another camera angle, and you can place that wherever you want. It's for piano teachers. It can be used for other large instruments as well. And that's something that I wouldn't have thought of, but since we survey our users, that's how we decide on what features to add, how to make Forte a more music lesson specific tool.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. And even like down to the detail of scanning a QR code to connect it to the right call. Yeah, I love that. There's so much thoughtfulness. Yeah, so you guys have full duplex audio, which basically allows you to give like immediate feedback that doesn't interrupt the student. You have screen sharing that doesn't hide each other's faces. You have a practice notebook that can never be lost and never be forgotten.
That right there, like do a survey of music teachers, like real, like like frontline music teachers, and like if you could just say like my students would never forget their notebook, it was just sign me up for that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think before COVID, there was when you talked about online instrument lessons, the conversation was always about what was lost when you moved from in-person to online. And I think after COVID, during COVID or after COVID started, there's a lot more discussion around what's gained rather than what's lost, and ways technology can make the lesson experience better than in person. And the notebook is kind of it's a great example of it, because on the one hand it's trivial, on the other hand it's a huge headache in the real world. And we look to just continue to build on that. And obviously the big gain when you move things online is access. You no longer have to live near your teacher to have a lesson from your teacher. But there is more that can be done with the technology to enable, enhance, empower the human-to-human connection and communication that is the core of music education.
Yeah, I can see how. So we've just gone over all the problems that Forte solving at the Forte level, I guess I would like to get into kind of this more of this access thing, because as Forte becomes more successful, or not even, because it seems already pretty successful as it is as a product. I guess more as this tool expands and its reach and more people are able to use it, how do you imagine access changing? Like, what is the vision for Forte as it evolves, and what kind of features, or how do you, so you mentioned that you survey people to figure out how to evolve the features, but in what other ways are you thinking about the vision for Forte?
I think for the access question, I always go back to the first pilot program we did with in partnership with Curtis. And we had a student in that program. His name was Shane, piano student, who lives in the mountains of rural Oregon, and far away from a big city. And the internet connection at his home was literally the same internet connection you would use if you were flying on a commercial flight over the United States. So, he's far away. He's got suboptimal internet connection, but he's super passionate about playing piano, and he's really creative. And here he had the opportunity to work with an extraordinary piano teacher from Curtis, who lives nowhere near that mountain in Oregon where he and his family live. And he just never had that before. And the internet connection, made it a bit of a challenge. We, ended up sending him an Ethernet cable so that he could, improve his connection speed a little bit. But it helped. And, you could see it in his mom's face. You can see it in his face. The amount of progress he made and the amount of encouragement he felt from finally having access to a really good music teacher, because no really good music teachers lived anywhere near where he is, just made all the difference in the world. And for the final recital for the program, was he the best? Was he technically the best performer? Maybe not, but he certainly had the most personality and creativity and gusto. And he was kind of the star for us. And it was just, it was in that moment that I think we were all reminded what we built Forte for, right? That this teacher, in a big city on the East Coast could get access and tap into and encourage and nurture that kind of creative energy that allowed Shane to really shine. And that's, that's what we're here for. We spoke to a teacher in Singapore recently who had previously lived in Nairobi. And when, she moved home to Singapore, and she, no longer worked with the student in Nairobi, her student called her and said, well, now that, COVID is forcing everything online, I could use my teacher here in Nairobi, but I'd rather, teach with you. And so now this teacher in Singapore and the student in Nairobi have been reunited, and they were doing it on, doing the lessons on Zoom for a while. It was a challenge. Now they're doing it on Forte, and the student's making great progress and is, reunited with a teacher she really loves. So it's those kinds of stories that kind of get me up in the morning and get me working on making Forte even better than what we've got it to right now.
And for me, I'm really enjoying being so close to how things are starting to the dust is settling on COVID, and people are getting confident to go back to in-person things. And we are all witnessing how the future is going to unfold, and the hybrid approach that we all are kind of having these conversations on the side. Like, yeah, we can't wait to go back to our in-person classes, but we all know virtual education is going to be a part of our lives in a way that it was not before COVID. And so we're offering our program to a bunch of teachers at the 92nd Street Y who are freelancers in New York, and lots of them are friends of mine. You know, listening to them say, okay, like we're going to go teach 2 lessons on campus at 92nd Street Y, then I have 2 lessons virtual, then I'm going to have a break, and you know, I could go home and spend dinner with my family before I teach my last 2 lessons of that evening. Or I could go home, have dinner with my family, and then teach those lessons online. I think I messed up my explanation, but you know what I mean. The sort of convenience versus what do we need out of an in-person lesson? Like the question, as Mark said, it used to be we can't do all these things, so let's not do it. And now it's, we can do all these things, so let's do it. And, you know, it's going to be very, you know, it's going to just happen how it happens. And we'll see how many lessons are going online, how many lessons are going back to person. I personally foresee myself doing kind of like 2 lessons with my students in person and 2 lessons online every month, or something like that, to kind of maximize the positives of doing an online lesson without letting go of, you know, the real in-person lesson, which is also important. It's just another tool in the toolbox of educators now. You know, it would have been socially unacceptable to be like, hey, you know, let's do this 1 lesson on Zoom. I'm going to charge you the same. Don't worry about it. You're still getting a great music education. That wouldn't have flown 2 years ago. But now I think you can really say like, no, this is the best way to do it. We're going to do 2 lessons in person. Then, you know, you guys can take a break from commuting into New York City and dealing with traffic and paying for parking for these other 2 lessons when we really want to talk about theory and we want to talk about, you know, things that are maybe a little bit less essential that you're there in person, especially when you have a good tool that is suitable enough to take the place of that in-person time. Something that you can really tell a parent, this is quality. You can hear me like you were if you were in the room with me, and we can talk about those things even though we're in an online lesson. It gives you confidence to keep your price high, you know, to keep your value with your customers. It's a big step in the direction of the future, which I'm personally excited to watch unfold as we all get back to what we're used to doing.
I also think a lot about what might happen when, you know, when online instrument lessons become, you know, just part of the landscape. And you know, like you think about, well, you know, how many kids, you know, around the world chose to play guitar because there happens to be a guitar teacher in their neighborhood or in their town, you know, but there is no oboe teacher, there's no harp teacher, right? You know, when you take geography out of the equation, you know, I wonder, you know, will there be a greater diversity of instruments that are being learned? Will a young person in the US, you know, hear a gamelan orchestra and want to take lessons from a teacher in Indonesia? Will young creative people be able to tap into the energy of different musical idioms because they have access to teachers who grew up in those idioms? Just because we've taken geography out of the question, I think there's the long-term potential of this is, you know, we're only going to be able to watch it unfold over time. We don't know where it's going to go, but I think it will surprise us.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just even increasing the diversity of access to what kind of instruments you can learn, not just even what teachers you have for the instrument you want to learn. Yeah, that's really cool. And also just like I kind of just want to go back and appreciate that the story of Shane and the teacher from Nairobi, because I feel like that's hard to appreciate, especially if you're somebody like me who I live in the city and I have a certain internet speed, and I've taken music lessons on Zoom before, and it's been good enough to work for me. And I can see how Forte would be a game changer for me, even with the good internet speed. But I didn't even think about the way that a product that optimizes what matters to musicians, which is mostly the audio, and automatically adjusts to limited bandwidth and limited internet speeds, completely changes the experience for people who, for a lot of people who probably don't have the kind of internet speed that's in urban areas. So that's just really, really cool. Yeah, I think what other, so we talked about how the gains of virtual or technology with online music lessons has been, we've talked about time efficiency, and also the features that you guys have started to put together, like the super everlasting notebook. What other things have you guys been noticing as your product has evolved, or advantages or gains to the online music experience?
I think the biggest one, and again, it's kind of simple, but being able to play with my students at the same time is a huge step forward. I can hold a note, I can hold a low C, and I can talk to my students about how their intonation in relation to mine makes a huge change in the way that they sound. We can talk about raising a perfect fifth, making the interval a little bit wider, or making a major third. Like, I'm going to play a C, now you play your major third, and they can adjust. I'm using my trumpet slide here, but they can adjust their intonation down, and they can hear, oh, that moment of when pop, that note comes perfectly in tune, and they get that ring in their ears. And we can have that experience together online. And I don't know about everyone else, but that for me was a huge, like, oh, like, this is really progress. Like, we are it doesn't happen overnight, but like, this is a big step forward. I can talk about sound color in that same way. Like, while we're playing together, I can say, okay, here, I'm going to start to crescendo, and then I can play it with them. We can play a crescendo together. We can take a note and we can get louder and we can get softer. With a student of mine from the Aspen Music Festival this summer, I was even able to play a duet with him. Now, the latency was still an issue. Like, we haven't beaten the sound of light or completely solved for the challenges of latency. But you can be in time with your student as much as you want. But if you can't hear them, it doesn't matter that I gave you a beautiful entrance and you play that perfectly with me. If I can't hear it, then I don't know. So what we're coming at it as is like, let's solve for being able to really hear each other. So if I'm playing my instrument and I'm saying, hey, Justin, check out my C. Duh. That's not a C. I don't have a perfect pitch, but check out this tone. Right now, I want you to hear that tone, like darken that tone, and right, like how to expand and talk about those really like nuanced things, and do it with your student, and then be able to demonstrate it with them. Now let's do it together. Here we go. Let's try it. And then the latency is still a problem, but I'm finding myself thinking of it kind of like I used to think of Zoom. Like, it's like, okay, this is the best I have to do. Let's see what we can get. Let's get to work, and like, let's see what we can accomplish. And now with Forte, at least I can hear the other person while I'm playing. I can play a guitar chord and you can sing over it. Like, I switch chords and you can sing over that one. Like, that ability is like a real human experience with music. I can jam with my friends you know, we can have a YouTube video going and we can both kind of like improvise along with it, as long as we're not worried about the ensemble being 100% perfect. I can guide my student through a duet as long as I'm aware that they're going to sound just slightly behind me. They have a perfectly fine duet experience. To them, they're playing right with me. As long as I'm the teacher and I'm aware that they're going to be a little bit behind me, they have what is really close to a duet with a professional musician that they would otherwise not be able to sit down and play with.
Gotcha.
You know, the latency issue is something we get asked about a lot because musicians would love to be able to play together online. And if you could take that little bit of delay out of a connection, it would be possible. But it's a very, very tough problem to solve. Light traveling at the speed of light can travel 1,000 miles in about 5 milliseconds. A latency, a delay of 20 to 30 milliseconds is enough to break a live music performance at a moderate tempo. You know, at 20 to 30 milliseconds of delay of latency is enough to interfere. You know, your brain functions fast enough to, for that to interfere. And so 20 to 30 milliseconds works out to be somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 miles. So the distance between New York and London is about 3,500 miles. The distance between Sydney and Shanghai is about 5,000 miles. So in theory, the signal from one place to the other traveling at the speed of light over, you know, fiber optic cable could enable a live performance between those pairs of cities. The problem is the technology on either end, right? So, you know, I'm looking at my computer now. I've got my iMac in front of me. I've got Zoom running. I've got Chrome open. I've got Microsoft Word open. I've got other software running in the background. That slows down the processing of the signal through my microphone inside the computer before it gets on that fiber optic cable to head over to you guys on the other side of the world. And then it takes milliseconds for your computer to process it and put it out your speakers or into your headphones. So that, you know, we got to fix that. And we also have to just fix traffic jams on the public internet. Like that signal runs into delays as it's making its way from New York to Asia. There are lots of people tackling this problem. There's some really great work being done in Germany. There's really great work being done in Stanford in California, where they're trying to make this better, and we're tracking that very closely. But right now it requires really heavy engineering on both ends of the connection. But it will get better over time, and we will get there. There are musicians playing together online right now. They, if they're within 500 or 600 miles of each other, and that's something that we're gonna, once that technology is good enough to become like a fully consumerized product, we will build it in. But it could be a few years away. The thing we have going for us is latency is a big problem for the gaming industry, the online gaming industry. Milliseconds matter in these, first-person shooter games and whatnot. And that's a huge profitable industry. So there are big media players trying to tackle this latency issue. And hopefully, we as people involved in music education can ride their coattails to make what we all want to do a better experience as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that actually relates to the next question I was going to ask, and it's okay if you don't have another answer, but I am curious, like, what are what are the biggest challenges you guys are facing right now as a team? Like latency sounds huge, like that. I get why that would be a big problem. Are there other big challenges that Forte is facing and like kind of wrestling with?
Technically, or just like, I mean, the biggest problem I personally think about every day is there are so many music teachers around the world right now trying to teach music lessons on Zoom. How do we let them know that they can use Forte? That's something that we've been trying to solve a lot the last month and a half, 2 months since we decided to expand this outside of our conservatory network.
Right. So just awareness.
Yeah, just getting the word out there. We're an ed tech company. We're providing a technological solution to an audience that really uses it, and we have all of the challenges that are typical for that. In addition to getting the word out about who we are and what we have to offer, we have to build a tool that works for someone whose home setup is just a MacBook Air with the using the internal speakers and the internal microphone. But it also has to work for we have one percussion teacher in Malaysia who has an incredibly elaborate setup in his home studio, where he's got multiple cameras mounted around the room, and they each I guess they tend to overheat, so they've got cooling units for them, and it's all being fed through and interfaced so that it can get onto the computer. Forte has to work for that person also. We want it to be for everyone. We want it to be for the absolute beginner music student all the way up to the very advanced conservatory student, and we want it to be for the teacher who has a very simple home laptop setup all the way up to the elaborate studios. And that comes with challenges, but we're getting there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I just to echo what Mark is saying is like we keep running into we've fixed Forte's end, but there are some things that I'm frustrated with, like AirPods. Like AirPods, like we spent so much time and really meticulous work testing the audio and like how it sounds for the teacher, but also how it sounds for the student. And then you put AirPods in and everything just gets totally destroyed. Like, just like, forget it. Like the microphone is teeny tiny. They have their own audio processing going on within the headphones. And then, so it's just,
the Bluetooth creates a lot of latency.
And of course we can't tell the world not to use AirPods because everybody already uses AirPods.
And we can't tell Apple to change it because they're Apple.
Which is when Mark and Hunter had the idea for this referral program that we have going on right now. We're encouraging teachers to help other teachers know about Forte and sign up and use it. And if they can get 3 teachers to sign up, we'll give them one of the Blue Yeti microphones, which Mark has. You can see in his screen right now, which we tried to. This is a win-win for everyone, because then these teachers are going to use an external they're going to use the external USB mic, and then in turn their experience on Forte will be drastically improved. That's one thing that I've been telling people that ask my advice. It's like a $30 cheap external USB microphone on Amazon is $10,000 worth of improvement in your teaching. And if you spend $100 on a Blue Yeti, it might be double that. And then, but it gets smaller as it goes up. I have this really expensive setup over here that earlier today I just couldn't. It was better to just use the cheaper kind of USB mic for the purpose that I had in front of me. So we're trying to make it work for everyone, and we're trying to make it convenient and something that people want to use instead of something that they have to acclimate to and something that they have to figure out how to fit their teaching into this program, right? We want our program to just help them deliver the teaching they want to deliver.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I could imagine. Yeah, because you guys have to figure out how to adapt to all different hardware configurations. So it's like, how do you choose which ones to start with? It sounds like AirPods is going to be pretty far in the back.
Yeah. I don't really want to get in the ring with Apple, but I do. They talk a big talk about being kind of like the creative person's tech company, right? Like photographers like them, musicians like them. Hopefully they watch this Fireside Chat and hear me give them the tip that they should work on a musician specific set of headphones. Some things are just no brainers for us. Like we don't want our sound being cut off, and we don't want our audio being adjusted without us knowing about it. So there are other tools that you can use to have an optimal experience.
I'll be sure to email this to Tim Cook after this.
Yeah.
Thanks, dude.
All right, guys. Well, we're almost out of time. I think we can open up for questions from the audience. It looks like we have one so far, which is from Erin. She asks, has Forte been used in group or ensemble classes, or even to run online rehearsals for chamber groups and choirs?
Right now, we're staying very focused on the core experience, which is a one-on-one lesson. We know it's a great question, and we hear it often because group lessons and ensembles are such an important part of music education. And so we know we need to build that functionality, and we will. There are some challenges to that. We are pushing so much sound through the pipe between the teacher and the student. And as Liam described, we're pushing it full time both ways, that as you add more users into that experience, you're really pushing a lot of data through a pipe that may not be able to handle it, a standard internet connection. And so we want to be very thoughtful about how we approach that, because what we don't want to do is just degrade the sound for everyone. But there are things we can do. We can adopt something like what Zoom does, where I'm talking so everyone else's mic is kind of turned down. We also want to give some thought. I said earlier in the conversation that we spent a lot of time thinking about how to allocate screen real estate inside the browser window. We want to give some thought to what that would look like optimally for a group lesson or an ensemble. So it's in our product roadmap. We know we need to do it, and we will get to it.
All right. Makes sense. Do we have any other questions? It sounds like, yeah. We're going to open up the audience, I think, if there's anybody.
So I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Kajin.
Hyejin Yi asks, she's interested in using Forte, but slightly concerned about privacy policy with lesson recordings. Do teachers have control over whether or not lessons get recorded, or is it automatic?
Yeah, recording was something that when we started Forte was something that a lot of people were asking for. And in fact, it's one way in which technology can make a lesson better, right? It's just easier and more convenient to record a lesson if it's happening online. And so we built that functionality into the bones of Forte. There are other circumstances where it's required. So in the pilot programs we do, if the students are minors, if they're under 18, then some of the partner institutions we work with have a legal requirement to record those lessons. It's a safety feature. Right now, so we have the ability to record lessons on Forte, but but as a matter of practice, we're not recording them. It's actually expensive. We're allowing music teachers to use Forte for free right now. Enabling the recording function is expensive for us. It's expensive to, because we have to pay for that, and we have to pay for the server storage space and all of that. So we don't, as a matter of practice, turn on the recordings unless we're specifically asked by the teacher to do so. So no lessons are recorded right now unless the teacher asks us to do that. Even if the recording is enabled, it resides on a secure server. No one has access to it, and we never share it with anyone except the teacher or the student if asked.
So long answer short, no, it's not recorded unless you want it to be recorded. You ask us, and if you want the recordings, we'll send it to you.
Yeah.
And we are working on a feature where you can do that without having to email us. It's very much in the front of our minds.
To give teachers the ability to turn the recording on or off, and to download the recordings and share them with the student as they see fit.
Christina, you had a question?
Yeah, so thank you guys for sharing. You talked a lot about like access and the different pain points on how Forte came about. And I was curious for Hunter, because you have a tech background, and I was curious to know more about what is the alignment between like your personal mission and in relation with music, because it sounds a lot like the part about humanizing the experience used through technology, through these tools, because for us musicians, all this tech stuff is almost like a very magical thing for it to happen. Like Forte was able to create that space for the nuance that we could only experience in real life. So I was curious about what is it for your own, experience from, was it Magic Leap? Or,
Magic Leap, yeah.
Yeah, and even before, for this to be like your, lifelong mission or vision moving forward, because I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it has been my whole career trying to kind of figure out the intersect between tech and music. And early on when I started working for Magic Leap, the idea was I am the example of which I'm talking. I quit piano lessons when I was in 5th grade because my parents made me take piano lessons, and who wants to do anything that they're forced to do? And once I started to appreciate music more when I was older, I wanted to pick it back up, but you're always told that because you're older now, your brain's not as malleable as it used to be. You can't pick up a new language easily. You can't learn a new instrument easily, or as you used to. So my mission early on was to use this new piece of head-mounted display technology that Magic Leap was building to maybe allow someone like me to believe that, they can maybe learn normally, but because of this head-mounted display, you could put it on and look at a piano and it'll light up the keyboard and you can learn it really quickly. And I quickly learned, that's an instrument learning software. It's pretty much a game where you're just putting glasses on and following along and learning the basic core fundamentals. And the way I look at a musical journey now, after all that experience, is you start out as a zero. You've never picked up an instrument, you can't learn. But with instrument learning softwares in the past 5 to 7 years, you can download an app on your iPad and put it on your piano across from your guitar. And it's a pretty gamified way to go from a 0 to a 2 or a 3, where you learn scales and what middle C is and where to place your fingers and the basic 3 power chords that you can play 90% of pop songs with. And that's fun. And you're learning really fast. And I was getting help, not just from the engineers at Magic Leap, but from companies like Musician over in Europe and Floki and Scoove and all the Joy Tunes companies, Simply Piano. And I was, we were just teaching each other what our learnings were. And man, they still to this day get so many users early on. And I tried it myself. You go from not knowing anything to, you're at level 49 on the second week and you've learned all this stuff and you feel so accomplished and you're learning so fast. And then around week 12, 13, 14, and you kind of hit a wall. You've learned the basic core fundamentals, but you like jazz or you like pop or you like EDM and you want to become the artist you want to become. And you can't learn that from an algorithm. You can't get immediate feedback from an instrument learning software of how to play a certain song that you want to play that's not already programmed into the software. And it's at that moment that you need a human to teach you a personalized lesson plan to become the musician you want to become. And so when I left Magic Leap and started Forte with Mark, it was very obvious to me that is where someone grows into the musician that they were born to be. If they want to take that path, is when they learn from a real human. And, as we learned in the beginning of COVID, when this was all rushed online, we weren't in a place where that was possible. The existing tools, which I think was Skype for me early on, the very early bit of conference tool, and then turned into Zoom and Google Hangouts, I think it was at the time. You couldn't really get that experience from human because you couldn't hear the instrument. You couldn't talk at the same time. And your question about, my mission to humanize technology, something that is very noticeable on Forte with the kind of full duplex audio that we have in the Forte Pure Audio, where you can hear everything, is that you hear about Zoom fatigue, where you're like worried about where the yellow line is around whose box and like making sure you don't talk over someone or interrupt someone because you drown them out. When Mark and I tweaked the audio codec early on and we kind of figured out how to make it just as if you were sitting across from someone, if I'm sitting across from you, Christina, and you talk, my voice isn't going to go mute, right? We're just going to talk at the same time. And that's something that's very natural. We've done that our entire lives. So when you make the audio as full duplex audio as we do, it's very natural. You don't feel the fatigue of worrying about the tech, and you kind of forget the tool. And that's where the magic is. That's where you kind of feel like you're actually sitting with a human. And that's kind of been our mission the whole time. We wanted to create a piece of tech that just allowed you to not have interference with what the lesson should be.
Yeah, I can get preachy about this. I believe that performing music is the highest expression of the human spirit. And no algorithm is going to teach you how to do that well. What happens, whether it's, a beginner piano student and, a local teacher, or, the most advanced teacher in the world with the most advanced student in the world at the world's best conservatory. What happens in that moment between two human beings is really, really important. It's the generational transfer of knowledge, but it's also, the teacher encouraging the student to become, to fully develop their creative voice. And an algorithm isn't going to do that. And, we shouldn't ever try to interfere with what happens in those magical moments. Instead, we should be creating technology that makes it happen better. And that's kind of, what we live for with Forte.
And I think that's really where we have a lot in common with you, Christina, and 12Petals, and that, you've kind of taken that idea and like taken it to the next level with your mentor program, and, kind of really explain to young musicians that, you need this one-on-one guidance, and it doesn't even have to only be about your scales and your technique. It can be, if you want to become this, this full, well-rounded contributor to society through the lens of music, there are other people you can talk to, like Mark and Hunter, and some of the other great mentors you have on your website. So I've been enjoying conversing with you about these topics.
Wow.
See, we have, we've been talking about lofty ideas.
Yeah.
We have a very nuts and bolts question, but it is a good one. And it's, does the screen sharing function allow for on-screen annotation? And the answer is yes. We knew people didn't want to spend a lot of time learning new tools, right? When we were talking to music teachers, we were first getting going, we found that music teachers have have their tools that they use and that they want to continue to use them. So we didn't want to interrupt that. And so with our screen sharing, you can share sheet music using whatever tool you typically use. And if that tool allows you to annotate on screen, then you can do that on Forte. And Liam, you have a better idea for this. There's some teachers who've been
So
using their iPad, and
you can use the program Fourscore, which if you want the Ferrari of music notation software to use in a situation like you're asking about here, you get an iPad and you can, from your computer, you can AirPlay or what's it called? It's called Sidecar, which is like, it turns your iPad into a secondary monitor, essentially. You could also use two monitors if you have them. But basically, you can use your iPad and use the Apple Pencil, and everything that you write in Fourscore will come up on your student's screen in real time, right as they're playing. You can be writing, an arrow pointing like, okay, connect this phrase to this note, and they can see that while they're playing, and they can also hear you, of course, because of the audio that we're delivering. It's called Fourscore, as in FOR score, like it's 4 scores, not the number 4. Very good question. It's $20, but like I said, if you want the real, it really works well for your iPad. There's that. There's also, just the preview window is what I usually use when I'm teaching lessons in Forte, because it's the default of my browser, and it works well. I just kind of put it over here, and I have my arrow, and I can write red lines. That's about as complicated as I need to get. So I don't actually use the Fourscore quite as much, because I like to stay portable and just using like my laptop. But I know that the real iPad users love to use Sidecar and the Apple Pencil. There's a bunch of other great apps that you can share on Forte, which, I don't think we quite want to dive into all quite yet, but there's one I do want to share is about a tuner. And that is, with our screen sharing function, I found a great way. And since that our screen real estate is divided, so you can still see your teacher, and you can have your student put this browser-based tuner, it's called Tuner Ninja. You put that up and you screen share, and I can have a 9-year-old pick up a guitar and have it be completely nowhere resembling in tune, and we can do it together over the internet, and I can tune a guitar with a 9-year-old. And this is truly it's right up there with that audio quality, like the amount of frustration, like trying to get a 9-year-old with a lot of energy who just came back from baseball practice to sit down and tune a guitar. And like, you need engagement with your student, and you need a screen sharing that doesn't just put your teacher up into a tiny little corner. The student needs to be able to see you. You're like, no, Javier, focus. Like, no, you need to be a little more nuanced with your thing. And I can see him turning his thing, and we can look at the tuner together, and we can see that, oh no, Javier, you're on an A flat, not an A natural. You need to be on an A natural. So go, and like all these things, it's like, oh, just having the screen share be equally divided and have a clear audio with my student, it changed my life for the better. And Javier too, it's like he can actually tune a guitar now. He really learned it all on the internet. This guy is like the poster child for online education, because he's a very rambunctious, witty, and funny kid, and like he's always challenging me and always trying to like get his joke in or get his thing in, and kind of like he wants to like derail the lesson, but in a nice way. But so that was my screen sharing antidote, because I really do like it.
Liam has written a great article that we're going to put up on our Forte blog. It's not up yet, but I think it's going up in a week or so, in a couple days. I don't. But if you go to www.fortelessons.com and go to our blog page, you can see this article that Liam wrote about various tools like Tuner Ninja and another one called Groove Pizza that are really great tools for music teachers that can be used in conjunction with Forte. He's come across some really great stuff that I think could be very helpful.
I just put, somebody was asking for the Tuner Ninja. There's the URL address right there. It's just tuner.ninja. It's free. There are no ads. It's not as sensitive as your, Boss, $100 desk tuner, but people are just using their phones these days, and it works about as well as the tuners do for your phone. So I recommend that one, and it's free and it's easy and it works on every device. You don't need to worry about it on Chrome or Safari or whatever. It just works.
Wow, that's. I mean, you guys are doing so much. This is so great. We are a little bit over time, so I'm sorry for keeping you guys too long. I know it's all quite late where most of us are. But yeah, I think that's it for questions. Guys, thank you again so much for your time tonight and in the morning for you Singapore friends. And yeah, I'm super excited for the future of this. This feels it feels weird that this hasn't come out sooner. Like not now that I've really like thought through the experience of it. Like it's so exciting, and also the fact that the problem at this point is reached is such a good place, because that means your product is already solid and it sounds solid. So
Try it
yeah,
out yourself, man. It's free.
yeah, I will. I tested it out with Christina earlier, and it's pretty magical.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, because usually when people think about tech products, there's always this distance. There's always this, everyone gets fatigued from, let's say, social media, all this kind of stuff. But then what you guys are, doing and what you believe in, I think, that personal mission and the collective mission is so important, that you stay rooted to, the connection, human connection, and never ever diluting that motivation that drives all of us, I guess, whether we're teaching or in any ways, whether you're building a product. So, and having that access, the two main things that I really, really, really appreciate. And, you might say that you're still in the early part of the development, but that's so strong, and it's what we're lacking in humanity right now on so many different levels. So I really, really just want to thank you guys for doing this for all of us, and it's just precious. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about Forte. We're excited about it. It is free for people to use. We want as many people to use it as possible. And, it's all, in service to, filling the world with beautiful music, which is, everyone's goal here.
All right, guys. Well, that's all.
Thank you again. And thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks,
Thanks, Christina. Bye.
Guys, have a good night.
Bye now.